your host on The Tipping Point on Revolution Radio, where every Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we bring you the latest in this ensuing takedown of this global criminal empire.
That's an image of strength.
You'll get the raw, hard truth here on The Tipping Point. So come join us Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern in Studio B at revolution.radio.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
First hour, here we go. Greetings, Earth Explorers. Welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live from an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains. This is where the past meets the future. Here, the results are always positive. Might go a little past your imagination, but have no fear. You'll be safely traveling with us. We're streaming to you live from the America Free Radio studios, somewhere east of the Appalachian Mountains. And we are streaming through the Revolution Radio studios, #1 listener-supported talk radio in America today. So glad you could be part of us. By the way, just want to give a shout-out to Keystone Channel out there. Don't forget to check that out on Telegram. And also Alara of Syria. She was on our program a couple of I guess last Wednesday, wasn't it? And gosh, time flies so fast. And so now we're tearing Telegram up, and we're trying to reach out there across the world. Yes, I know my volume's a little bit lower than usual. Let me see if I can boost that up a little bit. Maybe we can increase this just a little bit. See if I can bring that up. Is that a little bit better out there? I know it's a little bit quiet, but I did some furniture refinishing in my office, which meant all this had to be taken apart, and took it to the other room, and now it's all back together again, and little bugs here and there, nothing really catastrophic, but hopefully everything is running all right tonight. All right, listen, we have a lot of stuff to get through tonight, and I want to welcome everybody in all of the chat rooms, because we are streaming through 6 different platforms tonight. Let me just check and make sure. Yes, oh wow, everybody's online. YouTube, DLive, Twitch, Periscope, and Facebook. And we're streaming through Revolution Radio as well on audio. So this is great. This is great. And I am monitoring the chats from all of those platforms. So it doesn't matter where you chat from. We're going to see it right here, and hopefully we'll be able to interact with you live. Let's see. Let's begin with the first story. The state is the enemy of the state. I took a little time with this one because it's what the founding fathers actually feared. What they really wanted to do was to try to create a republic. And a republic is where the people have representatives that go to Washington and they all get together and the people actually govern or run the government. The government doesn't rule over us. It governs affairs in between the states, which are sovereign entities inside the United States of America. But Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer likened basic election integrity measures embraced by several states, such as voter ID law, to the era of Jim Crow, and accused the GOP of attempting to suppress voters. He made the remarks during today's Senate Rule and Administration Committee hearing. And this is kind of a strange place to be politicking. This is a place where you kind of talk about procedures and policies and, things that the parliamentarian would guide you on. And the parliamentarian's not elected, but is so well versed in the history of the rules of the Senate that she can tell us or tell the senators what they can and cannot do. And this, what's called Senate Bill 1, S1, For the People Act. They always have these innocuous names like, the Heartbeat Act, and yet it'll be something to provide, abortion to all nations of the world free of charge, something like that. So when you see something For the People Act, it's going to be insidious. But critics, and I'm one of them, warn that this act will strip power from the states, and what it's going to do is federalize U.S. elections. Now, you might think, oh, gee, that's a good idea. Let's federalize U.S. elections. The federal government should be able to tell the states how to run their elections and who cannot vote. And on the surface, that sounds pretty good. Oh, we can have national voter ID law, and we can make sure that illegals don't vote, and we can make sure that tourists don't vote. We can make sure people only vote once, and they don't vote in multiple states, and blah, blah, blah. We make sure that no voter or ballot harvesting takes place, or that Ballots RS isn't running in the wee hours of the morning, printing off counterfeit ballots and feeding it into the system. Yes, yes, yes. Sounds wonderful. But that's not what the Democrats have in mind. Speaking to his colleagues during the hearing, Chucky Schumer blasted Republican state legislatures. That would be us. That would be your neighbors, okay? We're not talking about governors. We're not talking about secretaries of state. We're talking about your local congressman, your local senator, the guy that lives 5 houses up or the next neighborhood over, the guy with whom you could meet easier than probably your local sheriff. That's how easy these guys are to speak to. You want them to come by your business? No problem. You want to meet with them in their local office of their precinct? It's the easiest thing in the world to do. These guys are willing to speak to their constituents because they don't have that many, all right? They only have half of the people that live in their neighborhood, basically, if that. And so, every new face, every new handshake, every new voter that they can pick up means a lot to them, a lot. So Chuck Schumer is blasting these guys. And he's specifically pointing at states that could be at risk of changing their minds, like Georgia, like Michigan, like Pennsylvania, like these 5 states that withheld their electors until the very last minute and then waited for an orchestrated event to happen to switch the temper of the Senate so that the debates would stop and they would stop considering electors fielded by state legislatures, which is actually the ones that really have authority. Anyway, Chuck Schumer called it infuriating. He accused Republicans of being afraid of democracy and trying to prevent people from voting. They always throw democracy in your face. It's a great word because it's part of their name, democracy, Democrat, right? You get it? It's sort of like French fries, potatoes. No, maybe not. It's not even that well related. But he says some of these voter suppression laws in Georgia, and anytime they mention voter suppression laws, it means not allowing, and I have to tell you that 59% of dead seniors do support Virtual Joe. Just so you know, he does have a very high approval rating among dead seniors. He is talking about voter suppression laws in Georgia and other Republican states that smack of Jim Crow. You know, we don't want to stop dead people from voting. We don't want to stop illegals from voting. We don't want to stop counterfeit voters in China from voting. You know, you just can't disenfranchise these people. He said it's 160 years since the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments abolished slavery, and Jim Crow still seems to be with us. Blah, 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 blah. This is what they hit you with. This is what they hit you with. This is the art of narcissism. They ask questions or make statements that are accusatory in their form. You know, the old classic, like, do you still beat your wife, yes or no? Well, it's not a yes or no question. This is how they style the questions. They're nasty, as President Trump used to say, nasty questions. Their laws, he goes on to say, their various cousins in Republican state legislatures across the country are one of the great threats we have to modern democracy in America. Really? Yes, I suppose it is. If you just change the word democracy to Democrat. According to the Washington Post, these laws would strain every available method of voting for tens of millions of Americans, the most sweeping contradiction of ballot access in the United States since the end of Reconstruction. See, this is how Chuck Schumer talks. If one political party believes that when you lose an election, the answer isn't to win more votes, but rather to try and prevent the other side from voting, we have an existential threat to democracy on our hands. Wow, look who's calling the kettle black. If we don't stop these vicious and often racist actions, that's another dog whistle right there. Third world autocracy, will be on its way. That is why the country so badly needs S1. This is Senate Bill 1. A bill that would combat all of these voter suppression efforts. We just have to let these dead people vote. We know the way they would have voted if they were alive, and we just can't suppress that. A bill that would make it easier, not harder, to vote by automatically registered American voters when they get a driver's license. And you have to know that we have a motor voter law that automatically registers illegals who have to have a driver's license to drive in this country. It's kind of nice to know who they are and where they are, where they live. They got to have some form of ID in this country. However, when they get that license, they're automatically registered to vote. And if you don't believe me, I want you to look at the number of jury duty requests that happen in the state of California. And when you receive a jury duty, how they get the list to ask to serve jury duty, they get it from the voter registration. Now, in a year's time, lots and lots of courts, civil courts, criminal courts, state courts, federal courts, state felony courts, they all have to have juries. And what happens is these people receive a jury notice. They respond by saying, I can't serve on the jury. I'm not a U.S. citizen. What that tells us is that these people are registered to vote. And in some states, we know in Chicago, we know in Boston, we know in California, some cities in California, illegals are allowed to vote on local issues. Well, that's the camel's nose in the tent, I'm afraid. Once you start checking off boxes, it's not like, hey, I can check that box, but I can't check that box. No, they take them all. They take them all. American voters get registered when they get a driver's license in many states. By guaranteeing at least 15 continuous days of early voting, a bill that would limit dark money and corruption in our politics and much more. That's actually not true. If you allowed 15 days to vote, then you get a lot more voters. That doesn't necessarily mean that you get a better result. You know, when voting first started in this country, it was only landowners that could vote. In fact, if you really want to get right down to it, it was only male landowners that could vote. Yeah. These were people that had a dog in the fight. These were people that paid property taxes. These were people that were affected by the tax laws and commerce laws that were being passed. Of course, as time went on, people that were not affected by those commerce laws, people that didn't have a dog in the fight, didn't pay any taxes, they started voting. And, of course, as time went on, women got the vote. Other blacks got a full vote. All of these, things that changed in the early structure of the Constitution. In the early days of the United States, let's say right up to the Civil War, there were about 25 to 30 million people in the country. For about 100 years, by the time the Civil War was fought, in about 100 years, some 4 million African Americans were sold into slavery. And as slaves, being a bondsman, as they're called in the Constitution, they were not allowed to vote as a full person. They had a 2/5 compromise, which means it took 5 black people to get together to form 2 votes. And this was their way of solving the problem that these people were brought over here. They were sold by their own countries into slavery. They were bought by landowners and by or croppers anyway. And eventually, of course, it proved to be financially not feasible. So it was being phased out. It is used as kind of the red herring as to why the Civil War was fought, but that was not what the Civil War was fought about. It was a result of the end of the Civil War, but it was not a reason why two sides of the nation went at each other and killed 1 million Americans. That's not why it happened. It happened because of confiscatory tariffs of abominations that were put by the 7 northern states against the 13 southern states. And this is what they fought over. They didn't fight over slavery. They fought over taxes. Of course, at the end of the day, the moral rightness, the moral value of not having bondsmen in this country was the result of the Civil War. And I think it's a good thing. The 13th Amendment, which was the Emancipation Proclamation, took the place of the Nobility Clause. This was the original 13th Amendment. It was in the process of being ratified when the war broke out. I think almost 2/3 of the states had ratified the amendment. It is said that Virginia or West Virginia had, I think it was Virginia, ratified it. But the public notice for the ratification was lost because the newspaper that published it was burned. And so the 13th Amendment did not officially get ratified, even though it was written, it was voted on, and unofficially it was ratified. There were no amendments during the Civil War, and after the Civil War, the 13th Amendment was the Emancipation Proclamation, which gave everyone the right to vote and gave everyone citizenship. Now, then we went to the 14th and 15th Amendments, which had to do with, Dred Scott and other rules that made it very difficult for African Americans to get a foothold in this country. All of that went away by 1965. The Republicans finally prevailed. It took them literally from 1860 to 1965, 105 years it took the Republicans to get it through. Now that's stick-to-itiveness, you have to admit. 105 years it took the Republicans to get the Civil Rights Act through. The Democrats blocked it for 105 years. But you have to understand, after the assassination of President Lincoln, and forevermore, actually, the Democrats controlled one or more branches of government, all except 40 years from the day this country was founded in 1787. Our form of government was established to be a republic. All of that time, except for 40 years, and then it was tenuous, the Democrats controlled one or more branches of government, sometimes all of them. And when the Republicans did control government, it was by the narrowest of margins. And the one thing the Republicans have never been good at is leading from the minority side. The Democrats have always been good at that. Of course, they use tactics that normal people don't use. They use murder, they use subterfuge, they use blackmail, they use compromise, they use bribery, they use all kinds of subterfuge to get their way, and Republicans just don't do that. I don't know why they don't do it. They have the same ability. They're in the same buildings. But there's just something about the moral thread of the two parties. And a lot of people are saying, well, we need a third party. I'm listening to that. And I have to tell you, the way that our country is set up, we have some 56 different parties in this country. 56. Yes, I know. It's crazy, isn't it? But the way our country is set up, those two corporations, the corporation of the Republican Party and the corporation of the Democrat Party, Democrats were established in 1848. Before that, they were the Anti-Federalists. But once they got set up, they control in the states, on the state level, the ballots. So you may have a ballot in a state that only has two parties or three parties on it, sometimes four. You'll have independent, you'll have libertarian, but you don't know what it takes to get on that ballot because those two corporations are the ones that control the ballot. That's why we don't have 56 candidates for president. That's why we don't have from 56 different parties. That's why you don't have, 40 candidates for Senate and 25 candidates for congressman that you do in other countries. In other countries, you have 16, 17, 20 parties. And, of course, the way their elections work, if none of the candidates gets 50% or more of the vote, they take the top two, and the top two may have 7% and 6%. That's a small amount. But they take the top two, and then they have a runoff between those top two. So you have a man and a woman, or a woman and a woman, or a man and a man with 13% together between them, and then they will run against each other. And then, of course, in that election, people only have two choices. Maybe you have the Labor Party and you have some, green new energy party, or you have the communists, or you have, the Lords of Laundry Party. You don't know. And then what happens is when those individuals are elected because of their charisma, because of the way they look, because of the amount of money they spent on their campaign or their grassroots organizations, then they go into the parliament. And the parliament is a little like our Congress. It's made of two different groups, a House of Lords, a House of Commons. You have a lower house and an upper house. And usually nothing but fistfights for a year. And that's the way it goes. Hi, Cherokee Drifter. Good to see you out there, finally. And Alan Holland, I don't mean finally. I didn't mean that. I meant he says, I'm here. So he's announcing that Cherokee Drifter is in the house. And Mark Hofsepian, I want to recognize you. You're always there. Good, solid supporter, and I appreciate that very much. Delina, she says, isn't it interesting that we have to pay for a roof and food on the planet we're part of? Yeah, it is interesting, but, who do we pay? We pay the people that built it. We pay the people that constructed it. You didn't grow the trees and cut them down and haul the logs yourself. Somebody put the labor together, took the risk, put it all together, put it on the market. Somebody bought it, paid them for their labor and a little bit of profit so they could feed their families. And then you bought it 3 hands or 4 hands later. And then you paid the people who paid the people who paid the people who built it. And that's the way it works in this country. That is the American dream. The American dream is you come here and you get a piece of land with a house on it, and it's yours. It's yours. You could do with it whatever you want. You want to burn it to the ground, burn it to the ground. You want to paint it pink. You want to rip all the carpet out and walk on the wood floors? Have at it. It's yours. And when you're done with it, you're ready to move to Tulsa or to the Keys, you can sell that house and recoup your money back out of it. If you've added value to it, you can get that as well. If you get a farm, you can grow all of the sorghum, all of the soybeans, all of the corn, all of the beets or corn or cabbage that you want. And if you're sick of cabbage, that's all the cabbage you can eat. Nobody can stand you eating any more cabbage. You can sell the cabbage for a car or a college education, or you can sell it and buy other stuff that you need, like clothes or a truck or a tractor. That's the way it is. And if you have surplus, you get to put it in the bank and your kids can inherit it. That's the American dream. And I will tell you, Delina, no other system of government works. If the government owns everything, and then they decide, oh, Delina, we see your need. You can live in this fine, beautiful house until we decide somebody else needs it more than you do. And then we're going to come and say, Delina, one of your kids moved out. So you're going to move into this smaller house over on the other side of town. It has 2 bedrooms. And we're going to move a family into this 4-bedroom house. You don't own anything. And here's what happens, Delina. You might think, oh, gee, that's wonderful. I don't have to pay for the house. But what happens is you lose your value. You are of no value whatsoever to the system, to the state, to the federal government, or to yourself. There's nothing in your name. You don't have 2 nickels to rub together. You are, and especially if you speak out against the state or criticize the state or anyone who works for the state or anyone who has worked for the state, they're going to come and take your stuff. They're going to come and throw you out because you don't own anything. Capitalism is the only system that works. Capitalism at its core says this: you own your stuff. Make as much as you want. And if you make more than you can use, sell the surplus and trade it for whatever it is you need. And if you're efficient and hardworking, that surplus can make you rich. And don't we all want to be at least well off? You know the difference, right? I define well off as you can go to the grocery store and you can buy whatever your heart's desire, whatever your stomach says you can get down your neck before it spoils. You want to buy 5 days worth of food, 7, 8, 10 days worth of food? Fine. You want to freeze a bunch of steaks and hamburger and a turkey? Great. You don't look at the brands. You don't look at the prices. You look at the best quality that you want to eat. You don't hoard. You're not buying for an army. You're buying for you and what's in your household. You go to the cash register. She rings everything up. You get your little discount, whatever it is, hooked to your phone number or a little UPC symbol or whatever. And you don't look at the receipt. You stuff it in the bag and you go home and put it in your fridge and start your week consuming that luscious food you just bought. That's well off. Well off is you don't look at the receipt. You want a new car? You want a new truck? You just take your old one in, or you call up Carvana and say, you know what, I'm sick of my Dodge minivan. I don't have any kids at home anymore. I want a Jeep Rubicon, a black one, 2 years old, automatic with a four-wheel drive, and I want the soft top. You find it in our Carvana, you punch a few buttons, you make the trade. They come to your house, put your old car on the truck, leave the Rubicon there with the keys in your hand, and that's it. That's well off. That's well off. Now, wealthy is a different thing. Wealthy is where you no longer have to work for a living because you have so much money that one of two conditions exist. Number one, you could spend $10,000 a day for the rest of your life, the rest of your kids' lives, and the rest of your grandkids' lives and not run out of money. There are people like that. Yes, there are. If I gave you $1,000 a day and you had $1 million in the bank, how long could you live before you ran out of money? $1,000 a day, you had $1 million in the bank. Chat room, anybody have an idea how long that money will last? You can give it to me in years. That'll be fine. $1 million, you get $1,000 a day, every day. When does the money run out? While you're figuring that out, I'll tell you what the second condition is. The second condition is you have enough money that is invested in other things. Like, let's say you invest in a company that owns 36,000 apartments. And those 36 apartments are 90% occupied. And so the corporation is taking in money and it's making a profit and it's managing all these properties. And of course, the value of all those apartments are in that corporation. You own stock in it. That's correct. Alan Holman is correct. The money would run out in less than 3 years. That's right. If you had $1 million and you were smoking $1,000 a day, in less than 3 years, you'd be broke. Yeah, 2 years would be $735,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. All right, now let's do this. I'm going to increase that amount to $10,000 a day, 10 grand a day. Now, I know some of you, you could spend $10,000 a day for a week, for a month maybe 6 months, at $10,000 a day, and then you would be wore out. You'd have enough to drink, you'd have enough to eat, you'd need a rest. You'd probably take a couple days off. Of course, you wouldn't be spending your 10 grand those 2 days, so the third day you'd have to spend 30 grand. Yeah, it would get old really fast. But let's say we do that. Increase it to $10,000 a day. That's a good habit by anybody's scale. Now let's increase the amount of money we have available to $1 billion. Not 1 million, but 1 billion. Okay, now, Alan, how long would the money last? $10,000 a day. You got $1 billion in the bank. Just one. Just one. $10,000 a day. No, we're not giving away $10,000. We will give away some lemons on D Live tonight for sure. How about I give you the answer? It's pretty close to 300 years. 300 years the money would last. I don't know many of you that would live 300 years. If you lived 100 years, and your kids lived 100 years, and your grandkids lived 100 years, you and your kid and his kid or her kid could spend $10,000 a day every day for 100 years. That's the difference. That's the difference between well off and rich. Yeah. That's correct, Fearless. It's 300 years. Now, you take a man that is earning, let's say, $10 billion a year. Musk, Bezos, Warren Buffett, Reynolds, Michael Bloomberg, these guys are worth $40-50 billion, okay? I mentioned the two richest men in the world. Bill Gates is probably the third. Zuckerberg's up there too. That's more money than a city could spend in 200 years. Yeah, Mark Hovsepian says, if I was spending $10,000 a day, I would make it 300 minutes. Yeah, I'm not talking about putting it up your nose, Mark. I'm talking about consumerism, okay? Of course, you're using the logic, and I think it's probably correct logic. Who needs $1 billion? Who needs to be a billionaire? Why do we even have billionaires? Who could spend that much money? Well, obviously, they're not spending that much money. They're working that much money. They're working that much money. That much money is invested. That much money is hiring people. They're not spending it on Wheaties and Oreos. No, they're buying factories. They're employing people. Donald Trump had 500 companies that he owned. 500 companies. Do you know he had over 25,000 employees? Yeah, 25,000 employees for years and years and years and years and years. And do you know that those magazines, those tabloids, those America haters who hated us more than anything, they searched the world over. They searched from South Africa to Greenland, from Scotland to California. They searched the world over to find one employee, one disgruntled employee that would badmouth President Donald Trump. Zero. They all loved him. Generous, loving, overpaid people, went above and beyond, paid off people's mortgages, paid off their hospital bills, paid their college educations off. He was a generous man. Oh, that all of our wealthy people were like that. But they're not. They're like Jim Steyer. They're like Michael Bloomberg, who funds an organization called Pueblos Sin Fronteras, which means countries without borders. You know, all those people that showed up on the southern border wearing pristine, clean, freshly made Biden t-shirts. You know where they came from, right? Pueblo Sin Frontera. They came from Michael Bloomberg. They came from his money. They came from George Soros. They came from the people who hate America. That's where it came from. So when we talk about these bills, S1, that is designed to give people that hate America a voice, an anonymous and powerful voice in our election system, you can see what they're trying to accomplish. I could just tell you, this is it's a terrible way to go when we see this happen. And I hope that S1 does not pass. I don't think that it will. I don't think that you're going to get some of the Democrat senators. Manchin from West Virginia is probably not going to go with it. And I have another thing I want to talk about tonight, too, that has to do with being able to stack the voting roster so that they can get their way. And I don't either. Michael Allen, he says, I don't like Bloomberg. He doesn't have humanity's best interests at heart. It's true. He's a vindictive, I don't even want to use names to describe him, but he is one of the global media empire. You know, the 6 individuals that control printed or cabled or broadcast media. I'm talking about radio, I'm talking about cable TV, satellite TV, and printed media. Newspapers, things like the Washington Times, the Washington Post, not so much the Post, they have some good writers there, but the New York Times, all of these work with several feeds. They work with Associated Press, right? You've seen that, AP. The other one is Bloomberg. Bloomberg is Michael Bloomberg. He owns the hub, is what it's called. And so the news and the syndicated stories go through him, and that's the feed. And people pay for those stories to fill up their scripts for the news actors. The news actors are the people that sit there in your evening news or your 24-hour news stations, and they read a screen, without moving their eyes, and they don't blink for minutes at a time. Doesn't it make you crazy to see these news actors reading the news? And they'll read anything. They're like Virtual Joe. Virtual Joe will say, and President Harris, and he never blinks, nothing. He just reads he doesn't say, wait, talk about President Harris. I'm president. I'm president. What do you mean, President Harris? No, he never does that. His eyes never register that. He just reads the teleprompter. Yeah, so you get it. All right, next story. I want to talk about, I don't want to talk about it, but I do want to talk about it. You know what I mean. Polygamy. Wow, we got to get around to this subject eventually, right? Polygamy, it appears, is legal again at last. The Massachusetts city of Cambridge has put in place a measure that recognizes domestic partnerships of more than two people, euphemistically referred to as polyamorous families, okay? Which in practice means orgies, sexual relationships between multiple adults in one household. I know we have all kinds of names for it. You don't need to put them in the chat room. This is a family program. I'm just saying that you knew this was coming. And, of course, once this threshold is crossed, then it opens the door for not just, 3 men and a baby, but it also opens the door for one man and multiple wives, which we have been there before. Christian Post reported on the radical social construct. Now, listen closely. A domestic partnership. I'm going to have a drink of water because I just want to make sure I can get... Yeah, Oblivion 8 on D-Live gets it. Maybe there's a lot of Mormons in that county. Well, you can go back a little further than that. You can go back to Jacob. Jacob had 4 wives. Each of these 4 wives had 3 kids. Each of these 3 kids fathered a nation, hence the 12 tribes of Israel, right? He had 4 wives, he had 12 kids, and that fathered the nations that pretty much we see on the earth today. A domestic partnership in the city that is home to Harvard University. Have you ever been to the Boston Museum of Science? I'll cover that in a minute. Harvard University is now defined as the entity formed by 2 or more persons, 2 or more, that means 3, who are not related, like not brother and sister, and consider themselves to be a family. They must file a registration stating that they are in a relationship of mutual support, caring and commitment and sex. I threw that part in. Caring and commitment, and intend to remain in such a relationship until further notice. I added that part too. This is just italics that I'm adding. The revised policy removes the requirement that everyone in the partnership must live together, and also scraps a section that makes domestic partners submit proof of their familial relationship to the city. Like, the proof would be, and you know what it would be, right? The proof would be a utility bill. I have a utility bill with Bill and Ted and Alice. Yeah, and we all live in the same place, and we all see there's a joint checking account between all 3 of us. You see that there? And here's a picture. See, here's a picture of us down at the chicken wing place, all 3 of us together. Yeah, yeah. So this is a familial. Once you get to the chicken wings, it's called familial. The revised policy removes the requirement that everyone in the partnership must live together, as I said. The recently formed polyamory, not polygamy, the Polyamory Legal Advisory Coalition otherwise known as PLAC, which gave input concerning the change in Cambridge, said in a statement that they hoped it will be a wave of legal recognition for polyamorous families and relationships in 2021. These are modern times, you know. Reaction to the development came swiftly and soundly, as it allegedly signals further destruction of the traditional family, bound by natural law that began with the acceptance of same-sex marriage. I told you. Years ago on this program, I said, if you let Heather have two mommies, or my daddy has a roommate, you let that continue, what'll happen is eventually it will be my daddy has roommates. My mommy has two roommates. You know, Heather has three mommies. This is where it's going. Polygamy was foreseeable because the arguments in support of same-sex marriage always had broader implications. Like, for instance, they haven't figured out how to procreate. So obviously, if everybody begins pairing off based on chromosomes, the human race dies. Yes? There are implications, broader implications, okay? I hate to tell you this, but same-sex marriages don't have kids. They have pets. They have pets. They have dogs. They have cats. They have iguanas. They have hedgehogs, but they don't have kids. They don't procreate. So these societies get smaller and smaller and smaller unless they recruit, unless they convince other people to take the same lifestyle. Now, I have to tell you, having a lot of people that have worked for me, worked with me, worked next to me, that have taken up that lifestyle, they got stuff. Because and I know, because I had 4 kids, and now I have 9 grandkids. That's right, I have 9. 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry, 6 grandkids. 2 different generations. Sorry about that. The thing is that you either have kids or you have stuff. Yeah, that's pretty much the way it is when you're young. You want a new car? You want to be like the Joneses next door? Mr. Jones and Mr. Smith next door, the 2 nice gay men. And I'm not bashing anybody. I'm just saying they both drive new cars. And they both dress impeccably. And they both have college degrees with their student loans paid off, and they own a home together. They got stuff. I'm just saying, you either have kids or you have stuff. In the early days, that's the way it is. I love my chat room. I just love my chat room. Mark, I got to read it. Okay, I'll read it. I will. I'll read it. He says, I don't. Excuse me. Wow. I'm blushing, all right? I'm blushing. I can't help it. It's a yellow light, but I'm still blushing. I don't mind same-sex marriage as long as both moms are hot. I get it, okay? There was always Mark out there. We will always have that perspective. Wow. Those fighting to redefine marriage refuse to discuss those implications because they were more concerned with getting what they wanted. Maybe. Those who were concerned about the long-term implications of same-sex marriage were called bigots and fearmongers, and now it turns out we were right all along. AFA predicted this decades ago. Ed Vitagliano, who is the executive vice president of the American Family Association, said in a statement issued to the press. He said, once you reject the biblical model for human sexuality, marriage, and family when it comes to homosexuality, there is no longer a logical stopping place. Polygamy and polyamory are acceptable, Vitagliano said in a statement. This return to pagan sexuality began with the rejection of God and his word, capital H. Unfortunately for the people of Massachusetts, who have now no longer concerned with burning witches, and eventually the people of this nation, is paganism leads to barbarism. We can expect lawlessness and violence to only increase as our people rush headlong away from the Lord. In true Romans chapter 1 fashion, Vitagliano said, darkness will only deepen in their hearts and minds. That's a good name for like Exorcist Part 4, right? Father Vitagliano. The Post reported the city of Somerville, Massachusetts, a community just north of Cambridge, implemented a similar change last summer. So you could see that I think this is maybe what you would call a flash in the pan. Okay, you're going to have a few condos, you're going to have a few sailboats, you're going to have a few, wine bars and places like that. They're going to end up in this kind of relationship. But it's small potatoes, and like I tried to tell you earlier, they don't, and good cooks too, right? They don't procreate, so they don't have extended family. You don't see big pictures with 60 people spanning 4 generations, right? You just don't because they haven't figured out how to do that yet. But the implication is that now they have legally made a precedent for polygamy to return. And this can go both ways. I will say that more likely what you're going to see is the same thing that you see in nature, the same thing that you saw in biblical times. One man who has financial capabilities which are beyond those of an ordinary working man, a trash collector or a plumber or a carpenter is not going to have 4 wives. Can't afford it. No. Either have kids or have stuff, and 4 wives means 4 kids at a time. No. That's a lot of diapers. Not going to happen. Traditionally, that's what's going to happen. In fact, it says in Isaiah, in that day, and whenever Isaiah says in that day, it usually means ima, ahora. It means now. In that day, 7 women will come to one man saying, "Give us thy name to take away our reproach." And basically what this means is that in the last days, righteous men of capability are going to be so rare, and there will be women who have children who have no father at home. Either they had it out of wedlock or they had it and then got divorced, and there's no man to support, there's no family, there's no leadership there at home. 7 of these women will go to one capable man and say, "Give us thy name to take away our reproach." In other words, let my child, be named after your name so he can grow up to be something. And in Utah, you have to understand, by the time the Saints made it to Salt Lake City, the men had been pared down to a small number of people, all right? They fought in the Mexican-American War. They were hunted down by Union soldiers. They were killed off by Indians. They died of disease. They had a rough way to go. These were stone cutters. These were miners. These were loggers. These were tough guys that led tough lives. And they died off. And what happened was there were large families, 3, 4, 5, 12 kids that had no provider. In those days, women didn't get a second job. They didn't have a skill other than, all the skills it takes to be a mom. But one man did, and his name was Brigham Young. In those days, he would be considered a billionaire, okay? He had money. And there was no question that he was capable. He was brilliant. He had a lot of great ideas. He did make it to Salt Lake City. He did establish the city. And he also had 44 wives. 44 wives and their kids. And they were all last name Young. Like Steve Young, the football player, San Francisco, Steve Young, descendant of Brigham Young. Youngs came from Brigham Young. Now, of course, when polygamy was outlawed by amendment, then obviously all these families had to be broken up. Now, he still supported them. He still gave them money, but they had to move out of the house. And no more, what did we call this here? Amorous or polygamous relationships. Still, a lot of Youngs out there, a lot of Youngs. And the family name went on and on and on. Why? Because they procreate. Can you imagine what Brigham Young's progeny would look like if you pulled them all together? That was started out in 1834. And say about 1855, you pulled the Young family together and took one picture. there would be 500 or 600 people in this group. Unbelievable. Unbelievable how fast they grew. That is procreation. That is how communities get formed. That's how things get done. And, of course, reasons are what they are. I'm not going to get into the politics of it. We made it to one man, one woman, and that's what marriage was until we allowed gay marriage. And now we allow these polyamorous relationships. And it starts in Cambridge. Maybe it's probably ongoing in California. They just don't talk about it. They don't have a law about it. It's certainly out there. Little tiny communes coming together and thinking, oh, this is just wonderful until it isn't wonderful. And then it becomes barbarous. All right, we got a couple minutes left in this hour, but I want to talk about the sins of the fathers. Not in the sense that you think. I'm talking about a scientific sense. Did you know, of course, you know that I went to college for a long time, like longer than most people are normally in school, 16 years. Seems like forever. I was like a professional student. But one of those lifetimes in college, I studied genetics. And in genetics, you get to do one thing that is mildly enjoyable for some, and that is you get to kill a lot of mice. I don't mean with a mousetrap. I mean, you breed a lot of mice, typically white mice because they don't bite. But you breed white mice, and you treat them various ways or mistreat them various ways, and then you get to humanely terminate them and then take them apart and see what happened. Well, studies in mammals have shown that the memories of various environmental effects, such as diet. Let's take a quick break. Be right back after this.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Be evasive, but that doesn't mean that they're telling the truth as opposed to fiction.
And Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, and there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came and also the daughters of men, indicating that there were giants before the Nephilim.
And sons of God, plural. They weren't talking about Jesus coming down.
No, that's right. Yeah.
I'm Steve Crawford, host of Factor Theory Live. Join me every Sunday night from 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Standard Time on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Check it out.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light. Integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
If you think for 1 second that the Capitol will ever treat us fairly, you are lying to yourselves. Because we know who they are and what they do. This is what they do, and we must fight back. You can torture us and bomb us. Fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us.
Good evening.
Are you awake yet? I hope. We've tried and we've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. The time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence at the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio. All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Hey, great. Listen, all you people that have been buying books out there on Amazon, thank you so much. But you've been buying the books and you haven't been getting the autographs. But we can fix that right here. I have a signature card. See that? That's got my signature on it. It says the present from the future. And it's adhesive backed. So all you have to do is peel this back off and stick it right in the cover of your book, and boom, you have my autograph. Just like that. So if you bought the book on Amazon, don't worry about it. Get the autograph anyway. And also remember that you get the audio version for free. All you have to do is write me at the email address that's inside the cover of each book. There's a different email address inside of each title. And that way I know where it came from. And then I will send you the link for the audio version for free. So if you're not a great reader, don't worry about it. I read it for you. And of course, if you buy the book direct from the website, I will send you this genuine imitation rubber armband that says the present from the future. That'll get your conversations going. All right, let's talk about the sins of the fathers. Turns out, environmental effects such as diet, weight, stress, they're being passed on from the dads to the offspring. Despite these states not being coded for in the DNA sequences carried by the sperm. We have observed the trauma of the parents passed on to mouse pups for many decades. Now we have a new explanation for how it's possible. This is something that we observed a lot. You can, through drugs, induce conditions such as diabetes. Yes, we can give white mice diabetes. It's not genetic. They don't have it when they're born, but we use drugs and we starve them of certain chemicals and develop diabetes in the pup, or in the mouse. Now, when that mouse has progeny, that is to say, when it has offspring, the pups often develop diabetes on their own. It's something that we've witnessed for a long, long time. Now, the story has much to do with a area of science we call epigenetics. Okay? Molecules that attach themselves to DNA can act like on or off switches that control which sections of DNA get used. But until now, we haven't known which of these molecules can carry the settings marked by at least the father's life experiences to be incorporated into an embryo via sperm. That is to say, when something like diabetes is induced in the father with drugs, the mouse pups often develop diabetes even though it is not hereditary. Now, the big breakthrough in this study is kind of frightening. Of course, it was funded by DARPA. Of course, you knew that. The big breakthrough with this study is that it has identified a non-DNA based means by which the sperm remember a father's environment, like his diet, and transmit that information to the embryo. And that's from McGill University, an epigeneticist named Sarah Kimmins. Now, this means that trauma can be coded in molecules that attach to the DNA in the father. When sperm are produced, let's see if I can spell that right. When the sperm are produced, that molecular code gets passed along to the pups. Now, we use mice because the generations are pretty quick, white mice because they're rather docile, and when you grab them behind the ears and pull their tail, you can hear or feel it snap a couple times. Their life is over. It's a very humane way of doing it. It just hyperextends the spinal cord and they die. I've killed thousands that way, of course. Every geneticist does that. Epigeneticist Arian Lismer and colleagues were able to demonstrate that the effects of a folate-deficient diet could be passed on by altering histone molecules in sperm. Simply put, histones are really basic proteins. Of course, DNA is a complex protein, but it wraps around another protein. It tangles around this. So the histones are really the basic proteins that DNA winds around for tangle-free storage. Because, when a cell gets ready to replicate, what happens is the chromosomes kind of unfold. This complex protein unfolds, and then it replicates, unzips and replicates, and then it rolls back up again. Well, this rolling, unrolling, and rolling process, this is where mutations occur. But in mammals, when male bodies build sperm, they throw out most of the histone spools to allow for tighter packing. But a small percentage still remains, about 1% in mice, but about 15% in humans. Yeah. Providing the scaffolding for DNA in regions specific to sperm creation and function. Metabolism, embryo development, to allow the cellular mechanisms to make use of these DNA instructions. Chemical modification of these histones. And that chemical modification in this experiment was done with a system that's very common. We call it methylation. Methyl group is a CH3, carbon with 3 hydrogens. It is small. It is easy to stick on stuff because carbon will readily stick into organic compounds and the hydrogens will adjust. So it's called methylation. It is what allows or prevents the DNA to be read so that it can be transcribed into protein products. Now, poor diet can cause these histones to change their methylation status. Now, methylation can occur in a lot of different ways. Really, basically, when you have double bonds, there's things called cis and trans, trans fatty acid, right? Cis means that the methyl groups are both on one side of the double bond. Trans means one is up here and the other one is down here. Okay, so you have the double bond between them, between the carbons, And on top of this and underneath this is where the methyl groups are. That's called trans. So now you know what a trans fatty acid is. So by feeding male mice a folate-deficient diet from the time they were weaned, the researchers were able to track the changes to histones from the male sperm and in the resulting embryos. And indeed, sperm histone changes were also present in the developing embryo. No one's been able to track how these heritable environmental signatures are transmitted from the sperm to the embryo before. The team also discovered these effects could be cumulative, and they could lead to an increase in the severity of birth defects. In other words, if you starve a generation after generation after generation of certain nutrients, the offspring will begin to show the effects genetically of that starvation based on the way they produce the histones in the sperm. In humans, the spirit of the individual is much more influential on the molecular coding of the DNA lattice, because the spirit of that individual brings energy and unique origins to the environment. That is to say this: two genetically identical human bodies can and will diverge due to subtle changes made to the DNA by the spirit of that person residing inside that particular biology. That doesn't happen with mice. Mice don't have individual personalities. They don't have individual will. They just don't. They are, I wouldn't call them soulless, but they don't have free will. Humans, a human class being, is a different class of being. They bring a powerful energy to and a will to the combination of the spirit and the body, which makes up this soul that we have here on the earth. And as such, you know this already, that twins will have different likes and dislikes. They'll have different habits. They'll have different appetites. There'll be different body weights. They'll eat different things. They will marry different people. This is the way that it works with genetics. Now, the researchers hope that expanding our knowledge of inheritance mechanisms will reveal new ways to treat and prevent such conditions. But I caution, there's a whole lot more work to do here. But here's the can of worms I'm opening up here. We know, and many of you are aware of this, all the people that are sitting out there in Telegram right now. Telegram has really come of age in the last 90 days because of COVID, because of the made-for-TV virus. Let's call it the as-seen-on-TV virus. It has forced a lot of people into lockdown way worse than you and I see it. I'm speaking to Keystone Channel, the woman that owns the Keystone Channel. They're in lockdown 101. They cannot leave their house. Yeah, unless they have a destination, a reason to go, and an amount of time that they're going to be out. It's severe, like under penalty of arrest. So in order to get out, in order to reach out and connect with other people without censorship, people gravitated to Telegram. Now, Telegram's been around since 2013. I've been on it since they first switched the light on by myself. Telegram I used it for international phone calls. It was great for that. But so Skype, so are other things. But recently, Telegram has really come of age. It's really beginning to become functional. And we're going to do much more with Telegram. So you want to go to Telegram and look for America Free Radio, add me as a channel, and listen and share the stuff that I put on there. Yes, Keystone is an excellent intellect and a smart lady who speaks 5 languages, and she really puts herself out there and for all intents and purposes conducts this Telegram college, which is just amazing. I was in awe of what we got done in an hour. It was really, really good. But let me get to my point. The point is, we're all aware of this, not just the made-for-TV virus, but also the vaccines. Now, I've already seen a show of hands of those of you who intend on taking this vaccine. Not a lot of support out there, I got to tell you. People in our chat room are aware, they're awake, they're not woke, but they're awake, and they're not probably going to take the vaccine. They just know a little bit more than the average bear. But I'm telling you where this epigenetics is going, okay? Once you can write to these histones, and I already told you 15% of this survives from generation to generation in humans. Once you're able to write to the histones, you can change the DNA from generation to generation. Now, what if I were to tell you that men who take this vaccine are going sterile? That is to say, their sperm is no longer effective. It may swim, it may be alive, it may go out there, but the genetic material doesn't transfer. It doesn't interface with the female anymore. No progeny. It's not something that you would see right away. The vaccines have been out there for so little time, we haven't really seen the results. And I can tell you a lot of people that are of childbearing age, I am no longer, of course, but other people that are of childbearing age, they're waiting and seeing. They're going to wait and see. Let me just look at it for a couple of years, let people get it, and then we'll call me back in 2024. Let's talk about it then and see how it's going. I'm just saying, yes, I agree. Overland Lad, very disturbing. It is disturbing. These studies, like the one, by the way, this was published in the publication called Developmental Cell. I'm going to include this story with all the links in my free newsletter that goes out after the program. If you don't get the newsletter, I can't help you. I can't help you. It's free. It means it don't cost nothing. I don't ask for any of your information, nor do I share your information. All I want is your name and your email address. That's it. It's so simple. All you have to do is go to americafreeradio.com. It's right there on the front. Sign up for the newsletter. 2 lines, you're done. And I will send you these notes, and then you can do your own research. That's what I want you to do. I want you to read the stories that I read. I can't cover it all in 2 hours. It takes me 10 hours to get ready for this 2-hour program. And I don't get through it all because of you, because of the chat room. And it's, hey, let's give away some lemons. What do you say? We got enough people in there. Let's just do it. Here we go. I know. It's short notice. If you people are riding the fence, hey, it's just the way it goes. I'm gonna distribute right now. I'm gonna put 200 in there this time, just because I'm feeling amazingly magnanimous tonight. So in 20 seconds, we're gonna find out how these 200 and something lemons, 204.1 lemons, are gonna be divided among listeners that are watching us right now on dlive.tv/Brooks Agnew. We like to support the other platforms, DLive and Twitch. We love Twitch, and we encourage you to follow us. Okay, here we go. Wow, Oblivion 8, 102.1 lemons. That's real money. Let's see, Mark Hovsepian, 59, and Mad Hat 1, 42.9. That's real money there. That's real money. All right, that's good. That's the way the cryptocurrency went out tonight. I really, really appreciate you being out there on DLive. We also have listeners on Twitch and Periscope, and 1 listener out there on Facebook. That's okay. That's okay. Facebook's all right. We get a lot of business from Facebook. They don't treat us very well. They don't treat us very fairly. We walk on eggshells on Facebook, but we like the community, okay? So if you're out there listening on Facebook, big thumbs up, my friend. Big thumbs up. Make sure to send us a chat, and we'll see it in the line. I know. Mark's holding up for the Mercedes-Benz. That's what he's doing. And good to see you out there, Oblivion 8. Space Lincoln Landrew, I love your post. He says, this is why all I care about is The Walking Dead. Let the damn world burn. That's a good line. I like that. So that's why I call it the sins of the fathers, because it looks like chemical modification that the fathers go through, various chemical modifications, could be in the form of vaccines, especially messenger RNA vaccines that write to the DNA. This is going to be passed on to the kids. And it's not just battling a vaccine, it has other things. What is that, Oblivion? I don't think this vaccine is experimental. I think they know just what they're doing. That's pretty scary stuff. That's a big claim, Oblivion, but it's your thought, and I'll go with it. Now it's out there. All right, let's talk about the civil solution. We talk about this from time to time, and I've certainly written about it in my books. I would like you to consider our differences. We have them. Numerous times this month, I've been in conflict with people, and that conflict could have gone poorly. It didn't. I'm a white male, and as such, am already the most despised of all creatures on planet Earth today. I find myself asking how I became such a hated enemy of the state. Well, for 20 years, the Global Syndicate has owned our educational system. It took them a decade to get their generals in charge of the unions, the banks, the global media empire, but they know what they wanted to accomplish, and they stayed focused. Once they got control, they implemented the curricula and their Marxist message. They unmelted the pot, called America, and segregated all the little groups by color, size, religion, hourly wage, political affiliation into tribes. And then they set about teaching each individual tribe to hate all the other tribes. That sound familiar to you? Then we have been brought up to this inevitable state of war between us. Too much water under the bridges now. Too much blood has been spilled. Too many words have been said, like a feud that has lasted for generations. We are now in revenge mode, and there is no going back. There is only onward to war. Using force to resolve our current differences would mean death, disease, misery that would last for decades. Millions of Americans dependent upon modern medical treatments, like those with diabetes, would die. And millions of others, the weakest and most vulnerable, would suffer terribly. And it would not be quick. In the midst of the confusion, the wailing, the screaming for vengeance and burning would march our global enemies. This is how civil wars always end. The people that start them are never the people who end them. I suggest those of you naively calling for a civil war start getting more politically active instead. If you say you hate politics, trust me when I say you will hate war many times more. In either case, you'll likely get whatever it is you actually work for. When I hear the left screaming blindly for death and civil war, a revolution, a secession, or some other use of force to resolve our political division in the United States, I step back. If one of us, especially white people, responds with the violence they are requesting, society will explode like a hail of rocks against the crystal towers of intelligence, and there will be nothing left to salvage. The rage that you see on TV in Florida, in Oregon, in Detroit, Chicago, it's death and it's blind. They know only death and revenge, and the pain in their souls for self-destruction is only surpassed by their penultimate hope to kill all white people first. You cannot pay off that hatred. You cannot appease that hatred. You cannot go to war with that hatred. It has been tried for millennia. They may be vanquished by the millions, and they have been, but they will come back over and over again, forever and ever, unless their hearts can be healed. The divide that the Democrats have created, it's significant, but it is not insurmountable, Earth Explorers. In spite of it, we still have much more in common than not. I have watched for years as the star children have tried to replace this rage with love and with brotherhood. But to this very day, I can see the hatred and violence seething just beneath the spit behind the words of these people. Even when I went for my routine drug screening this morning for my security clearance, it was there, forcing me to kneel, gaslighting me for even thinking that someday our society might not have to wear masks or actually be able to smile with one another face to face. She tried to make it appear as exasperation that I could be so dangerous as to think such a thing. But the tone of her voice betrayed her motivation. This combination of people calling for war and others intensifying the feelings of division between us just may get them what they ask for. They could bring tragedy upon us, the likes of which we haven't seen since Sherman's March to the Sea. The most destructive operation against civilians was during the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. If it is even taught in school anymore, it is insipidly described as a scorched earth campaign, in which crops and livestock, railroads, and other Confederate supplies were destroyed. Sherman's troops suffered a long and bitter war, believed the South deserved special punishment, and they set out to deliver it. What isn't taught is the extensive looting and the wanton destruction that left behind a shelterless population of starving and diseased civilians, or the rape and abuse of countless women and girls. By the way, only about 400 men were prosecuted for rape during the Civil War, all 4 years. I can tell you, if you've ever been in the middle of civil war, and trust me, you don't want one here at home. A new conflict in the U.S. will not be made up of two professionally controlled armies. It's not going to be. It's going to be combatant groups who are mostly untrained, poorly disciplined, out of their minds, and only superficially controlled, if at all. And like Sherman's troops, they will set out to punish each other. You cannot defend your turf or your farm or your house against 2,000 people carrying torches and clubs. There is no standoff. There is no deterrence. The only thing that will avoid this conflict is stopping the march before it ever happens. First, you have to turn off the propaganda. You have to shut down the flow of hatred from the global syndicate to the news actors and school teachers who are creating all the mini armies. There is an army of boys who want to dress like girls. There's an army of girls who want to be men. There's an army who want to keep killing millions of babies every year. There's an army for every color, every religion, and every hourly wage. So how do we do this? You cannot stop it from being printed or said or sung or put into movies or TV shows. That's called censorship. But you can turn it off. You have the power to shut it off. Replace the message for war with a message of love. Lay down the masks. and start smiling at one another. Again, it is the only way. Now, I have to talk about this Boulder thing. How can I add you on Telegram? It's the easiest thing. Go to Telegram and look for America Free Radio. It's a channel on there. You can search for it and just add it. Simple as that. And then everything that I post on the channel, you will get on your Telegram. And you can set your notifications to ding or not ding. I don't ding because that's all you would hear tonight is dinging, and we don't want that. All right, what happened in Boulder? The deadly Boulder shooting in a King Soopers store is a horrible event. Nobody's trying to say it isn't, okay? I'm not disputing it. However, since the debate is going on, there are some facts that need to be discussed. In particular, how King Soopers made an anti-gun stand way back in 2019. Customers who shop at Colorado's 148 King Soopers and City Market stores are being asked to no longer openly carry firearms into the stores. Okay? It's legal in the state of Colorado, but not allowed in King Soopers markets. In its announcement, Cincinnati-based Kroger, who's the parent company of King Sooper, they're a publicly traded company. They own a lot of different stores. They own Harris Teeter down the street here. They're a big organization, and they own City Market. They said its request applies to anyone who shops in its stores with the exception of law enforcement officers. Now, they said our number one priority is the safety of our associates and customers. Unfortunately, as we know, those with murderous intent generally don't give a crap if they're violating store policies. After all, they're willing to violate the state and federal prohibition on murdering innocent people. Duh. So, the announcements from Kroger and Walmart, by the way, come in the wake of a series of mass shootings in the country over the last month. The most recent in Odessa, Texas, that claimed 7 lives over the weekend. And by the way, that's a small fraction of the shootings that take place in Chicago every single weekend since Democrats have been in charge for decades, I am sure. King Soopers, in its statement, said it is joining those encouraging our elected officials to pass laws that will strengthen background checks and remove weapons from those who have been found to pose a risk for violence. In other words, the company made a vehement plea for Congress to restrict our gun rights and ask those who open carried to stay the hell away. As we see, such stances don't actually make anyone safer. Boulder is known by many in this state, and I've been there many times, as the People's Republic of Boulder. If it leaned any further to the left, it would be horizontal. It's unlikely many people in the store would have carried regardless of what the gun laws allowed. But one fact cannot be denied. When radical Muslim terrorists reach the point where he is willing to go into a grocery and shoot people he doesn't even know just because they are Americans, only a citizen with a gun can stop them. There is no law except the law of courage and preparedness. No one except the shooter would have died that day if there was at least one person in that store trained to use a gun in self-defense. That is a fact. If I owned a store, I would be wearing a gun just to let every person who shopped there know they're safe once they're inside my place of business. No one is going to rob them. No one is going to harm them in any way. The women are safe. The children are safe. The men are safe. Why? Because the law west of the Pecos is behind the cash register and watching over the place like a hawk. Relax. Smith & Wesson are here. No, Telegram is not part of Twitter. I would say they're opposite ends of the spectrum. Yeah, the Twitter owners are not involved with Telegram. Telegram is its own thing. Telegram was sort of like like WhatsApp, except they went a little step further and they decided to protect the people that are in it. You can say whatever you want, be whatever you want, and the people are free to turn you off. And there are all kinds of followers, all kinds of channels in Telegram. But if you join our community and you're part of the Keystone channel or Alara of Sirius or Sasha Stone or America Free Radio or the others, there's Rob Potter's out there and others that are out there that have channels, I can just tell you, you're going to be in a safe place. ESETI, ESETI up there in Trout Lake, Washington, they just recently got on, and now they're beginning to come of age. Of course, Red Pill is on there, and X22 Report is on there. Code Monkey's on there. I mean, this is the community. This is where we're going. You want to be there? Come and find me. Easy to do. Go to Telegram, look for America Free Radio, and be part of the community. All right, I want to talk about Virtual Joe's border show. There's a lot of people are talking about this. And this is a disturbing part of the border crisis story. Why is Virtual Joe avoiding the problem? What purpose could it serve to resist answering queries that are supported by the blatant facts, especially with Veritas's revelation of all of the people in the cages wrapped in aluminum foil? Well, this bungling of policy at the U.S.-Mexico border adds substantially to what many insist is the radical left-wing agenda beholden by the Democrat Party, also known as the Global Syndicate's political arm. We are allowing undocumented migrants to invade our U.S. border by pushing for election reforms to weaken voter authentication. It isn't a reach to appreciate which party the massive majority of these non-citizens would cast a vote for if they were given the opportunity. Virtual Joe's bungled border policy is dangerous, both politically and for American citizens. The overwhelming headcount statistics don't even calculate the flood of drugs, disease, and criminals riding this wave. And guess what? Texas is not going to sit around and let their state come under attack by drug smugglers and human traffickers, which is why they've dispatched the National Guard to tackle their own border problem. Yes, Texas National Guard is going to be guarding the Texas border. The fact that the administration is avoiding the obvious and refusing to answer questions is as problematic as the thousands of humans pushing to enter our nation illegally. And it's getting worse, and I don't see any sign of it getting better. It falls right in line with the radical left-wing desire to destroy America as we know it. If we want to save America, we have to stop this invasion. So how do we do that? Well, it has been said by me and others that if we do not fix 2020, there isn't going to be a 2022 or a 2024. A fact is a direct observation or of physical evidence. A few days before an audit was supposed to take place to evaluate the ballots, the paper ballots, and the voting machines used in Maricopa County in November, but before the trash haulers could arrive, a massive pile of shredded ballots was taken into police custody. First of all, it has been a fight and a half just to get to the point where they can get to an audit because the Democrats have been fighting every step of the way to prevent it from happening. They figure the longer they wait, the more permanent the 2020 election becomes. So when the court order was finally confirmed, tens of thousands of paper ballots that had no valid signatures, ordered up from Ballots R Us and delivered in the early morning hours after the polls closed, were shredded before auditors could lay their hands on them. Now we have some new details on these ballots that were found. Based on the early inspections, it does look like these ballots are being pieced back together, and they are from the 2020 election, not from a prior election, as was claimed. All these votes were for Virtual Joe. They all had the same signature on them, like they came from an assembly line, and they wanted to destroy the evidence. Keep in mind, these aren't just blank ballots. These are ballots that have been filled in by someone at a factory of sorts. For months, Maricopa County has been one of the centers of focus for investigation into election fraud. There have been just too many questionable events that take place with this election. For example, there was no chain of custody. These ballots were never secured after receipt from the Board of Supervisors. Why not? It means the ballots could have come from anywhere. They could have come from China. They could have come from Mexico. Tens of thousands of them were unfolded, meaning they were never mailed out in the first place, although they were counted as mail-in ballots. Now, why hasn't Jovan Hutton Pulitzer been able to do his job in inspecting those ballots? Ballots are shredded, and they're not supposed to be, okay? So then what? This won't overturn any election. I think they've basically gotten away with the perfect crime. They have. Winning is everything, and it doesn't matter how you win as long as you win. Once you win, you can make policy, you can shred, and you can begin the process of cleaning up the loose ends. All right, I got about 15 minutes left. I have to get this in because it's important. You recall on Sunday, we talked about the conflict in Ukraine. I have sources on the ground in Ukraine, and they are communist, and they have a perspective that perhaps you're not going to hear in the news. So last week, I discussed the movements taking place in Luhansk and Donetsk. These regions want to leave Ukraine, and they want to be annexed. They want to join Russia. They have been Russian since 1760, so don't get your panties in a wad here. Don't be surprised. The EU wants a natural gas pipeline. The global syndicate wants that pipeline to come from the Golan Heights. The Russians would like it to come from them. NATO has been fighting for the syndicate since before the end of the 30 Years' War. You call it World War I and World War II. It's not. It's a 30 Years' War. Now, there is some serious hardware and manpower being moved around as we speak, right now, as we're speaking tonight. And Virtual Joe has no leadership at all. He is not aware. He's not even aware of this. If he is, he forgot. This is being handled politically inside a Pentagon that is in the midst of its own civil war inside its own halls. There are provocative things that cannot be undone once they are committed. It does expose America because right now the current administration has left the country and they've left us in a very weak position. A couple of days ago, it was revealed that the United States is running B-52 bomber sorties to the North Pole. Now, this is nothing new. We've been doing this since I was in the service. We ran more than 100 sorties a month during the Cold War, and we flew them upwards of the North Pole. Why? Because we wanted to inform the Soviet Union that we had nuclear missiles in the air all the time, any time of day, 365 days a year. And if they wanted to attack us, the fail-safe orders of those B-52s in flight, which could not be detected in those days, would be on their way to deliver hell and damnation. It was a policy called mutually assured destruction, and it worked. Okay? These sorties, they're not real, but they're designed to be real. So they do these during all kinds of conditions, whiteout conditions, rain, dark, high winds. They want to make sure that in good weather it's easy, and in bad weather they are there anyway. The pilots and crews, they don't know if these are real or if they're exercises. Why? Because they're supposed to reduce mistakes made under the stress of the real thing. God forbid. Now, you also know that the U.S. and NATO forces have projected an enormous amount of firepower into the Black Sea. You're already seeing this on the news. Carrier groups are enormous investments in men and machine, and to put them in the Black Sea is an invitation for disaster. Sandwiched between Turkey and Russia and Crimea, which is Russia, this is not a good place for NATO assets to be sitting. Also, 28,000 troops, along with tanks, planes, helicopters, armor, artillery, and more, are all taking part in exercises at the precise same time that Ukraine has massed 90,000 troops, 450 tanks, and 800 pieces of artillery on the borders of breakaway states Luhansk and Donetsk. Have I described the tinderbox well enough for you now? Okay. Now, let me see if I can weave this so that you'll know what's going on. No matter what CNN tells you, no matter what the war whore tells you or anything else, you're going to know the truth right here. It is expected that the government of Ukraine, which you'll recall is the global syndicate controls since Johns, McCain, and Kerry expelled Yanukovych in 2014, will commence a military offensive to forcibly occupy both Luhansk and Donetsk in order to put a stop to their desires to be annexed by Russia the way Crimea was in 2015. Now, for its part, Russia, now we're not talking about Ukraine, we're not talking about NATO, Russia has amassed 250,000 troops along its large border with Ukraine and has already publicly warned it will defend the Russian-speaking peoples of Luhansk and Donetsk if Ukraine attacks. If Ukrainian troops, which are these NATO troops that are the original McCain and Kerry and Obama forces that tore Ukraine apart. You recall in 2013 when the riots broke out and Victoria Nuland went over there and had 100 people assassinated in the streets to get the public to look at what was going on in Ukraine. They forced Yanukovych out of the country to rule in exile from Crimea. He was Crimean. All of that. Okay, this is what we talked about on Sunday. So returning for a moment to the ongoing drill, okay, the drill toward the North Pole that our B-52s are doing. There are also a large number of American fighter jets flying along the northern border of the U.S. You can watch Monkey Works, and he can explain that to you. It's kind of odd to see fighters out there doing patrols along the border, but they are. Along with numerous refueling tankers, these are C-17s, 147s. They're out there running patterns. Also, and this is really, really strange. It's so strange, even Monkey Works noted it. We have seen call signs for Air Force 2 going two places at the same time. Now, that's a war footing. There's no doubt about that. When you have Air Force 1 and Air Force 2, or just Air Force 2, because that's the backup, right? If you're going to go into conflict, you move the vice president, okay? That's the plan. That's why you found oftentimes, Mike Pence down in the bunker when President Trump was in Korea. This is the way it's done, okay? Air Force 2 is almost more important to watch on a war footing than Air Force 1. When you see two planes marked AF2, Air Force 2, going in two different directions, that's a big warning sign, a big one. Even Monkey Works will tell you that. If he doesn't, he should. He should call me, and I will let him know. To give readers an idea about how serious a provocation this is, Each B-52, as you know, is capable of carrying 20 nuclear cruise missiles with multiple warheads. This is a deterrent for Russia. It is not a deterrent for some countries. They don't care. China doesn't care. India doesn't care. Pakistan doesn't care. Mutually assured destruction doesn't work with everyone. The mass media in both the U.S. and in Europe, they're not saying a word about this. Only I am tonight. When the fighting breaks out, and I hope that it doesn't, but if it does, it's going to happen in the next few days. The general population is going to be gobsmacked, and you're going to be scared because you're not going to know how or why it started. I'm telling you right now how and why it will start. Who is behind it? What's going to happen? Do you trust Virtual Joe? Because I don't. Do you trust the political forces that are inside the Pentagon? I don't. Do you trust the CIA? No. When you see these quasi-NATO forces, and these have Al-Qaeda fighters, these are fighters that are on the ground in Ukraine, and they were fighting, and up to, and I'm going to call it all the small arms fire, up to and not including heavy guns. 20 millimeters, yes, but not 30s and 40s and 105s. We're just talking about small arms fire. But they fought to kind of block by block to a stalemate. And that's where it's been for several years. During the Trump administration, nobody moved. You know why? Because Trump sent Javelin missiles to Ukraine so they could defend themselves. Okay? But now it's game time. These two states, they want to leave Ukraine. They want to be annexed to Russia. They're Russians. They are Russians. And they're communists in the purest sense of the word. And they want to be part of Russia. They don't want to be part of NATO. And NATO has been moving on Ukraine for quite some time. This is the Kerry John McCain NATO. This is what's going to cause this fight. And all these fights that happen, that break out into world wars, they start right there. Right there on those streets. These are the baddest people on the planet. They're big, they're strong, they're smart, they're mean, and they have resources that go back thousands of years. Thousands of years. Not going to give up. They want their freedom to do what they want to do. NATO wants to control the area, and as you know, as I told you last week, Barack Obama wants the pipeline to come from the Golan Heights, and Russia wants it to come from Russia. The European Union is going to get their natural gas. They have to. They've run out. They need to have this supply. Virtual Joe has shut down the XL pipeline in the United States, and effectively he has shut down the pipeline from Russia into the EU in favor of this pipeline coming from the Golan Heights through Iran. So these are the players. That's why I had my piece on Sunday called The Other Pipeline. All right, one more thing is about D.C. statehood. It's a mixed bag, okay? The Democrats are trying to push for the 700,000 or so D.C. residents that really don't get a chance to vote in congressional elections. Okay, because this 10 square miles is supposed to be independent. The Constitution says it's not supposed to be a state. It's not supposed to have a dog in the fight. But, of course, the Democrats are their champions, and so they're going to try to get them the vote, which all that really basically means is they want 2 senators so that they can overpower the Senate. But, on the other hand, it's also a partisan effort designed to give Democrats these Senate seats. But if the Democrats are able to push forward with D.C. statehood and gain these 2 senators, guess what? There is nothing stopping Republicans from doing the same exact thing. Texas is threatening right now to divide into 5 states. 5 states. That would provide 8 more senators, all of them Republican. And there are other states. California wants to subdivide. New York is considering subdividing because the city is not the state. And what they want to do is carve out the city and make it its own state, and upstate New York become its own state. So we could end up with 56, 57, 58 states. And the Democrats may rue the day that they fought for this D.C. to get their 2 senators. Same thing with Puerto Rico. So watch and see what happens. It's going to be a big-ass pissing match when it comes to killing the filibuster. If they kill it for one, they got to kill it for the other. I'm in the middle, I guess. I like 51 senators making the vote. They want it 60. It does kind of slow down the process, including judge approvals and cabinet approvals and all that kind of stuff. But maybe government should just go a little bit slower. What do you say? Just a little bit slower. Listen, here's the thing. This is America Free Radio. I'm going to bring you the best, most cutting-edge leading stories that I can and try to crack open these things for you so you're not surprised, so you know where to stand, you know what to do. I'm the host, Brooks Agnew. And I'm saying, peace, Earth Explorers. This is the way forward. Go out and look for the good in people and help it to grow a little bit every day. And if you do that, avoid these conflicts. Don't pick that, even if the fight is picked with you. And it has been several times with me this week. Yeah, my pupils went black, but nothing happened. Nothing happened. Everything got slowed down. Don't resort to violence. We can do this. We can change this country. Turn off the propaganda. Go where the propaganda isn't. Meet me on Telegram. Come here on these 6 different platforms that I'm streaming live. Chat to me. Let me give you lemons. You give me lemons. We'll trade back and forth. Support this program and support the networks that play this program. Please. Support Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Support Truth Frequency Radio. Support Keystone Channel and Alara of Sirius. We'll see you Sunday right here on America Free Radio.